Hello, I'm Fast Lawyer. Today we're going to review Skydance's BEHEMOTH VR, a game that was released on all the major VR storefronts December 5th, 2024 by developer Skydance Games. It normally retails for $40. I did buy this game. I tested it out on the Meta Quest 3 using link cable on my RTX 3080. BEHEMOTH is an action adventure game. This is a full review. I didn't beat the game, but I did get to the final boss. Unfortunately, I came across a game-breaking bug. It took me about 12 hours to get to the final boss. I did have every intention of finishing the game before this review, but the game-breaking bug has made it impossible. While this game-breaking bug will obviously affect the final score, it will not be the focus of the review. I will review the game fairly. Keep in mind, I don't know how common this bug is. All I know is it affected my game towards the very end, and I'm unable to complete the game because of it. Anyways, let's start the review. Let's talk about BEHEMOTH. BEHEMOTH is running on the Unreal Engine 5.2. On my RTX 3080, I was getting mostly 90 frames per second. However, I did notice some stutters, usually when scenes were loading in or where some events would happen. You do have full locomotion along with smooth and snap churning. There's comfort options and you can play seated or standing. You do have a button crouch. Now, the one thing that is missing from the settings is that you only have head tracking camera. You do not have controller tracking camera. BEHEMOTH is a dark fantasy action adventure game, so there is a lot of melee combat. There's archery, you can throw daggers, and seemingly there's lots of weapons you can pick up from falling enemies and use them, and that's technically true. However, there's 3 legendary weapons which you upgrade, and that'll be the only crafting you do in this game, and those 3 legendary weapons are necessary for some of the boss fights. So in reality, although you have technically 4 weapon slots and 4 alternates, you really only have 3 weapons because you need those 3 weapons, and switching back and forth is just not feasible. You'll need your legendary sword, legendary axe, and legendary bow and arrow, and you might get some limited use out of a shield or out of the throwing daggers, but all the other weapons are superfluous. And all this is actually related to the game-breaking bug that I talked about earlier. What happened is I lost my Logan Brighter. My legendary axe was just gone from my weapon slot and I couldn't retrieve it. It did not come back, and I don't know of any way to get it back, and it's needed for the final boss fight because you need to break one of his bracers with the legendary axe. That's the only weapon that'll do it, and it's gone, so therefore I am hard locked from beating the final boss. Now, this is related to another issue that I faced when playing this game, is that often when I would reach for a weapon, I would get a different weapon, or I would get a health pack instead, or I would pick something off the ground instead of the weapon that I was reaching for. Now, I did play seated, and that may have had something to do with it, but I was usually getting the wrong item in the heat of battle when I was just trying to reach for my weapon. And changing weapons is a key component of this game, so that's not a good thing. I did die a few times because of this issue, because you're reaching for a weapon, instead you get like a health bag and you can't parry the attack now. So I do consider this a major issue, one that's probably pretty prevalent in the game. However, I did play seated. Maybe if I played standing, it wouldn't have been so common. But keep in mind, I think for most people, this is a 9 to 12 hour single player campaign. I do think it's unreasonable to expect that most people will play that long standing. The other thing that I should mention about the combat is the parry system. I think this game has gotten lots of negative reviews due to the parry system. However, I do have a different take on this. I actually think the parry system is pretty good. Now, the melee combat in this game is not the best in VR, but I also don't think it's as bad as the negative reviews have mentioned, and I think if anything, it's just pretty good. It's not Hell Split Arena, it's not Grimlord, it's not Legendary Tales, it's not even Blade and Sorcery. And if you look at my video, you'll see that for the most part, I was able to parry the enemies, especially towards the latter half of the game, pretty well, pretty consistently. And by no stretch of the imagination am I a super gamer or anything like that, but this parry system does require timing and the right weapon angle. If you don't get those right, you will not get the parry. And once you get into the groove, the combat here becomes pretty exciting because there's lots of ways to dispatch the enemies. You can use your dash, you can use your strength power to throw enemies all over the place. There's environmental kills that you can do, like bringing down rocks onto enemies, or you can yank them off cliffs with your grappling hook. There's lots of fun stuff you can do here. And there's just not combat, there's an equal parts platforming and puzzle solving. Now the puzzles are pretty basic. For the most part, you're just moving these crates from one spot to another, and you just have to use the environment and your tools in order to figure out how to do it. I didn't find any challenge in any of the puzzles, to be honest. These are casual level difficulty. There's also lots of platforming, there's climbing and using your grappling hook to get around, and you do improve your grappling hook as you progress through the game, so you do start off pretty slow with your grappling hook. And even in this video, you'll see me sort of go slow while I'm using the grappling hook to get from one ledge to another. But after I stopped recording, I was actually just swinging from platform to platform like Spider-Man, like on the store page video. It is possible, you just have to learn how to get your momentum done correctly. It is one-handed swinging versus two-handed, but it is possible to just swing from platform to platform really fast, and there is a breakneck speed you can achieve. You just got to get into the flow and just learn from experience how to get that momentum done correctly. The visuals and sounds are also excellent in this game. Really good spatial audio. I could tell where enemies were coming from. There's some very scenic vistas. I saw some negative reviews about the visuals, and I just don't understand why people are complaining, at least not on PC VR. The boss fights were a good mix of combat or platforming. The odd thing about this game is that the behemoths are usually more of an obstacle course versus a traditional boss fight. It's actually the mini bosses where you're really challenged on your combat skills. But the boss fights here are pretty epic and pretty memorable, and I think they're the one thing that's really underrated about this game. Lastly, I do want to talk about the story a bit. Now, I did enjoy the story. It's got some good voice acting, but the problem is that the story is kind of predictable. You can see what's going to happen from a mile away, so that is a negative. But overall, I thought it was good enough, especially for VR. It sets you on an epic adventure, and that's what's matter, and you're immersed in this story. The set pieces are incredible, and the atmosphere is top notch. Overall, I did enjoy my time with Behemoth, but obviously I was frustrated with the game-breaking bug, and it is not something I can just forgive. If I have to rate Behemoth, I would give it a solid 7 out of 10. Without the bugs I encountered, I probably would have given it an 8 out of 10, so keep that in mind. Anyways, I'm Fast Lawyer. This has been my full review for Behemoth. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, have a wonderful day. Goodbye.